things here. As Anne said, my co-presenter Shari is still in court kicking ass at a juvenile trial. Our third presenter, Adrienne, wasn't able to join us today. So just an overview, we're going to do the introductions, a little bit more, talk about our topics. We have 3 things that we want to cover. Forensic interviews, which are also called CIC interviews, kids testifying in court, and then we're going to take maybe a short break. I'm aiming for 5 o'clock, and then we're going to talk about interviewing kids as an attorney. When we get to that section, we're going to try and talk about, different age ranges and kind of break it up into 3 different sections that we want you to think about. Before ending, we will talk about using an investigator as opposed to going to yourself and interviewing kids. And then we are going to try and wrap up about 5:50, kind of have a brief conclusion and overview, review the materials that we gave you guys, and then go over any final questions. The plan was, when Shari was with me, that we would take turns on the chat, but until I have my co-presenter, I'm going to do the best I can to monitor the chat. I just wanted to do a little bit of a step back. The juvenile section is presenting this, and I don't have a presenter from the family law section. That's not because I want to not include the family law section or family law attorneys. It's mainly because I'm not really that familiar with MCLEs, and I'm not technically the head of the juvenile section. So I didn't know kind of who to reach out to. It's my own ignorance. But we love family law attorneys, and we hope that if you're here as a family law attorney, you're still going to get a lot out of this. When we are attorneys, and either we are representing kids in court or we are cross-examining them, it's a very important role, which is why I wanted to have this MCLE presentation. I think that it's very important to really plan ahead about what type of questions you're going to ask, where you're going to ask them, and what really your goal of the meeting that you're having with your either client or the testimony that you're doing. What is the goal that you have? Is it only to meet them for the first time and build rapport, or do you really need to get some substantive information? That is why I want to do the presentation. Oh, there we go. All right. So without further ado, let's talk about forensic interviews. We have the who, what, where, why, which is the most important, and how of the forensic interviews, and when. So where, oh, well, I must have skipped a slide because I don't know what I'm doing. Isn't this great technology? So the first thing is, what is a forensic interview? A forensic interview is an interview of a child, always a minor, by someone who is trained in interview techniques to try and get as much information from a child as possible, usually about one specific event, sometimes more, and with the goal of getting that information in the least traumatic way possible, which is a big deal because all of these interviews are happening because something traumatic happened to a child. If you just start barreling in and asking questions in a really kind of aggressive way, not only are you not going to get the information that you need, but you're going to traumatize the kid. So the other question is where? Somewhere in Contra Costa County, I have no idea where, and it doesn't matter really where, there's some type of organization that conducts these interviews. Here, it's called the Children's Interview Center. In other counties, it's called something else. So if you go to a different county and are having to deal with a forensic interview, you need to find out who in that county does the interviews. Each county is supposed to have this type of neutral third-party forensic interview center, but very small counties probably won't have it set up. I dealt with Shasta County about 2 years ago, and they were just getting this type of forensic interview center set up. During the interview, usually a social worker is present, sometimes a detective is present, and sometimes someone from the district attorney is present. At the center, when you watch the interviews, because they're recorded, videotaped, and you can go watch them if you're involved in the case. Basically, there's one of those double pane mirrors. So the people who are there, whether it's a district attorney or social worker, can see what's going on. The interview usually has at least two people from the center involved, one person asking the questions and one person behind the glass who will kind of prompt the interviewer. The interviewer will wear earplugs. And sometimes on the videos, you can see them pause and kind of look off to the left or to the right because they're listening to the person in their ear, kind of prompting them. So they're in this room and there's a double pane glass, and then it's usually very kid-centric. There's a kid sitting on like a couch or a really comfy chair with a table in front of them. There's almost always coloring supplies, paper, so that a lot of times, even if the child is not asked to draw something specifically, the kids will doodle while they're being interviewed. And sometimes the interviewers will also doodle. It's a way of building rapport. So after this interview takes place, there is a copy kept, a video copy. And I want everybody to know, because this is like a really nuanced thing that you're probably, hopefully not going to have to deal with, but if you do, how do you as an attorney access these videos? There's a copy of the interview kept at the district attorney's office in this little plastic bin. And as you can see on this slide, it's super important. The CDs are stored by date of the interview, not the child's name. So try and at least get a date range of when the child was interviewed, because it will narrow down how to locate that CD in the plastic bin. In order to go and watch the video, you as an attorney need to get a protective order signed by the judge involved in your case. I provided a sample protective order in the materials. Essentially, in my materials, I wrote it up so that every attorney in the case could go and watch it, and only one order had to be signed. But you can always do it whether you're just asking the judge to give you permission to go and view the video. Once you have that order signed by the judge, you call the district attorney's office. I'm not going to give you the number, Google it and find it, and ask the front desk for the name and email of the head of the sex crimes division. Even if the child is being interviewed because of a physical abuse allegation that has nothing to do with sex crimes, the sex crime division is still the one who will have your CIC interview. So that's how you need to go get it. And that's who you need to talk to. Once you get the name and the email, if the front desk doesn't have the email, use the CalBar and look up that person's email. Email the head of the sex crimes division, whoever it is at the time, attach your protective order from the court and request a time to go view the CIC tape. Once you do that, what happens next is that you show up for your appointment at the district attorney's office. You get checked in, you get a little badge from the front desk, you wait in the lobby. Whoever you've made an appointment with or one of their underlings comes downstairs and gets you. And then you take the elevator or the stairs to wherever you need to go, and you sit in a little room and you watch this video. You can take notes, you can go back and forth. There's usually no time limit. It's a very small room. It fits like 3 attorneys max. So don't think that you're going to get everybody involved in that case into this room to watch the video. That's not going to work. It's a small room, and especially with COVID, just go by yourself or have other people schedule. It's also not super fun to watch these types of interviews with other people. It's not like a bring your popcorn type of thing. So sometimes it is better just to go by yourself. If you need to get this video into evidence, then you have to take extra steps. You have to literally subpoena the video from the district attorney's office, and then you need to go through the steps and treat this video as any other type of recorded evidence. Usually what that means is that you need to get it transcribed by someone. The detail about the procedure is not going to be in the materials, Susan. If you have questions, my email is going to be at the end of it. After the end of the presentation, you just need to email me if you ever come across this and can't remember the procedure. I'm checking the chat and answering questions. You need to look up the relevant evidence code to make sure you follow all of the steps to admit this video into evidence if that's what you need to do. And I haven't included in the materials the evidence code, so look it up when you get there or email me. In juvenile dependency, usually what happens is that the social worker will watch the interview and provide a written summary to the judge and to all the other parties in one of their reports. So we often don't have to subpoena the interview. If we read the social worker summary and we think that it's fairly accurate, then we wouldn't subpoena the video to court. If you need your client to watch the video, the district attorney won't let them in the building. So that's like a whole nother step. If you need your client to watch the video, especially if your client is in custody, then you have to arrange with the judge to have your client come to court on an afternoon when the department is dark and come and watch the video with you in court. It's a super awkward process, but it's just something that you need to do. It can be very valuable for your client to see the child's interview and see the child's demeanor and reaction, sometimes the detailed responses to the questions. It can help you and your client strategize the next steps of your case. All right, that's like all of the, what is the CIC interview? Where is it kept? How do you get access to it? So let's move on. So the how of forensics interviews. Do not ad lib the forensic interviews. If you have to use this model yourself or you're using it in court, go ahead and follow a rule. Okay, now I'm going to try and figure out. I'm sorry. Let's see. Oh, there we go. So how are forensic interviews conducted? There's a 10-step process that is followed by the person interviewing the child. This is also not in your materials, and I apologize, but if you Google 10-step investigative interview, literally this PDF will come up. I'm sharing this in detail because you can use this as a template when you are going to interview a child yourself and you really need information from them that's specific. Sometimes as attorneys, our goal is not to re-interview the child about trauma that happened. It's not our job to try and get to the truth. Maybe the social worker's done that. Maybe a police officer has done that, a detective. Our goal is more to help the child understand the situation they're in now and have the child tell us what they want to happen next. But if you do have to get to the bottom of something that happened with a kid, use this technique. Use this technique if you have to cross-examine or direct examine a child on the witness stand. If a judge starts asking a child questions because the judge is the one who wants to lay the foundation with a child, have the judge use this same type of protocol. So the first thing that happens, and you see it in the CIC interviews, if you see a forensic interview that does not follow this protocol, you need to question the validity of that interview. So the first one is the interviewer gives the I don't know instruction. And it's pretty much just guiding the child to say and be able to acknowledge that it's okay to say, I don't know. Kids don't tend to say that. So the example given is if the interviewer asks the kids, hey, what's my dog's name? Then the interviewer would prompt the child, what would you say? And the child would say, I don't know. And then the interviewer would confirm with the child in a really positive way. Yes, you're right. How could you know what my dog's name is? We don't even know each other. And then the interviewer does the opposite and says, if I ask you if I have a dog, what would you say? Or if I ask the child, do you have a dog? What would you say? The next instruction that the interviewer gives is the do you understand instruction, which is exactly what it sounds like. But it tries to get the kids comfortable with being able to tell the interviewer that they don't understand a question. So the way that this is done, and I think it's important that each time the interviewer tries to work with something with a child and is telling the child the rules of the interviewer always gives the child an example. So they get to role play a little bit. And here the interviewer says, hey, what is your gender? And then the interviewer says, what would you say, child? And then the child will be like, I don't know, because you just taught the child it's okay to say, I don't know. And then the interviewer would say, that's all right. Gender's a hard word. So then the interviewer would rephrase the questions. So a couple other things that the interviewers always do. They give a you're wrong instruction, which lets the child know that they can tell the interviewer, as an adult, an authority figure, the kid can say, no, you're wrong, that never happened, or that didn't say that. They can also, the next one is the ignorant interviewer instruction. What that means is that the interviewer tells the child, I don't know your story, I don't know what happened to you. So the child knows not to assume that this adult has all of the answers, which is usually what happens. The last thing in the steps before you kind of get to asking more actual questions is that the interviewer elicits from the child a promise to tell the truth. I would not, again, ad-lib this question. Use this exact language. Ask the child, do you promise that you would tell me the truth? Wait for the child to respond, and then say, will you tell me any lies? If you change the wording of this question and say something like, you're not going to tell me any lies, are you? Then you run into trouble, and the child may just answer in a certain way because that's their pattern and habit of answering. After you go through these 5 steps with a child, which once you get kind of in a rhythm with them, really don't take that long. I've seen them time and time in the CIC interviews. Then you can go into kind of starting to ask questions, but you don't ask questions about the specific trauma that's happened to the child. You do practice narratives. What that means is you start trying to get the child to feel comfortable talking to you. If you know something about the child, like this interviewer says, like, oh, I know you like to play soccer, tell me more about soccer. So that's something that you can start with, is like something that you already know about the child. If you don't know anything about the child and you're meeting the child for the first time, frequently interviewers will ask this question about the last birthday. And if you have a child who can talk, I mean, even a 3-year-old, last birthdays can be really exciting. You can also pick any kind of holiday that was recent. It's a really good way to get kids practice talking to you, saying more than one word to you, and also it helps you gauge their own ability to tell a story, which is essentially what you're asking them to do. So you're still not at the nitty-gritty stuff, you're practicing talking to the kid. These next steps, 7, 8, and 9, now you're getting to the meat of your discussion with a child. Sometimes I often see interviewers ask a child, hey, do you know why you're here today? And the kids will say, yes, something happened to me, or so-and-so did something to me. So that gives you kind of the opening that you need to take the next steps and ask some of these questions. And then if the child doesn't know or doesn't kind of give you that opening, there's other questions that you can ask. So the examples given here are, I heard you saw a policeman last week. Tell me what you talked about. Is your mom worried that something may have happened to you, not me? Tell me what she's worried about. I also like this one. I heard that someone might have bothered you. Tell me everything about that. Then you wait for the child to respond, and silence can help, because then the child may really just need a couple seconds to start talking. If you say, tell me everything about that, and then you just keep going and you start asking more questions, you're going to get into trouble. So give the child a chance to respond. Then, as you can see here, the allegation follow-up. Once the child responds and either says that something specific happened or someone specifically hurt them, Then you go back and you ask for clarification. You repeat the allegation in the child's own words. That's super important. And then you say, tell me everything about that, or tell me what happened. When you start asking more questions, you want to avoid at all costs yes and no questions and forced choice questions. We're going to talk about that in just a couple seconds. If there's multiple incidents, then this gives you some hints of where you can go from here and additional questions that you can ask. So this 10-step model is to be used if you're watching a CIC tape to gauge the quality of the interview. It should be used by you when you're having to interview a child about a difficult traumatic subject, and you've never met the child and are trying to gauge if they can tell a story and if they can tell you the truth. It should also be used by attorneys and judges when kids testify. So we're going to move on about, that is how CICs are done. I'm going to try and do this. And I told you we would talk about closed-ended questions, which we totally are. As I said, going through this 10-step process gives you the skills to really gauge the accuracy of a child's statements. Then you can advise your clients about the next steps to take in the litigation if you represent a parent. If you represent a child, then that also gives you a lot of information about how to approach your client. When we talk about why this is so important and how to do this yourself, if you cannot remember anything else from this presentation, then you need to ask more open-ended questions and fewer closed-ended questions. So what's a closed-ended question? Anything that can be answered yes or no. The key here that you know that a closed-ended question is coming is the questions start with the word did, or the question starts with the word was. Did this happen to you? Were you hurt in this way? Anything like that. Closed-ended question. In the 10-step interview process, we learn the term forced choice questions. And I told you we would talk about that. Forced choice questions always include the word or. You're giving a child the choice to answer and choose one of two options. Why this is so important and the examples that come up, unfortunately, it's a crappy subject. But if you're talking to a child that has been sexually abused and you ask the child, were your clothes on or were your clothes off? That doesn't give the child any chance to answer that probably some of their clothes were on or some of their clothes were off. They can only answer yes or no. The other thing that's important about closed-ended questions, the third type, is any question that can be answered with one word. The perfect example is if you ask a child, what color was your hat? The child can answer with the word blue, and that's it. If that is just a one-word answer, you don't get any more information. The reason why closed-ended questions are such a problem is that children tend to respond to questions with as few words as possibly required. I think that this is human nature, even for adults. When we're nervous or in a situation that we don't want to deal with, why would we volunteer information? But for kids, it's especially true. Closed-ended questions increase the chance questions will be suggestive. Oops. So the kids are going to answer based on your own biases because they want to please you, give the answer that you think, or the kid is going to guess. Kids in general don't really understand the difference between, for many kids until they're older, between knowing something that's totally true or just guessing. And so they will guess. Okay, I'm going to talk a little bit more about this and we can come back to the screen in a second. What you'll see in the materials later when you look at them is that the more closed-ended questions that there are, the questions that require the child only to answer with one word, it's the more the interviewer is talking and not the child. If you answer or if you ask kids questions with only yes or no responses, then they're never going to give you more than that. They're never going to give you a narrative. They will never tell you their story of what happened. And then you're never going to get the answers that you need. So the first issue that we kind of talked about was that if the question can be answered with one word, the kids will just say the one word that's required to the answer. Studies have shown that this is true for kids of all ages across the board. It's not just that little kids are susceptible, even teenagers. Open-ended questions reliably elicit more details from kids than closed-ended questions. I think that there's a tendency for all of us to address situations that are traumatic, situations of abuse and neglect. And we think that if we answer or ask kids questions that are short, that are yes or no, that in some way we're helping the child by making them more comfortable. But that's actually not true at all, because the child will never be able to share what happened to them. Instead, use questions like, tell me more about, and then when that section after the about, use the child's own language. If they call their cousin, but let's say his name is Sonny, if they call him cousin Sonny, but you actually know that person is the child's uncle, don't start calling him Uncle Sonny. That doesn't make any sense. The child won't understand. So use the child's own words. If you want really productive answers to your questions, use questions like what and how associated with a specific action. What made you do that? Or how did she do that? Then the child has to provide a description. We also talked about on the previous slide that closed-ended questions confirm interviewers' information and own bias rather than getting any new information from a kid. So for example, if you are talking to a kid about their day at school and you ask them, did you eat lunch? The kid will say yes. Did you play soccer? The kid will say yes, or the kid will say no. Did you have a good day at school? The kid will say yes, the kid will say no. And because you never ask them an open-ended question like, hey, what happened at school today that was exciting? You will never learn that a clown visited their classroom and made crazy, amazing balloon animals. You've basically just confirmed with a child by asking them yes or no questions, the things that you assumed happened at school that day. It also shows that you're asking questions that are long in length. What happened, or did you play soccer? Did you eat lunch? The child says they're one word. And if you were looking at a transcript of that interview, you were the one doing all of the talking. The other problem with these closed-ended questions that only rely on one-word answers, is that it uses the interviewees, i.e. you, if you're asking the question, on your own vocabulary, your own syntax, and your own words, not the child's. That presents a huge issue for comprehension. Kids' vocabulary is smaller than adults. So we often use terms that kids understand. Kids usually won't say that they won't understand or that they don't understand. And then you could even ask the kid, oh, I'm your attorney. Do you know what that means? Do you understand when I just explained to you that you won't be returning to your parents' house? Well, you've just asked them another yes or no question. So you're still just going to get a yes or no. And you really don't have any feedback from the child about whether or not they understand what's going on. The last thing is that studies show that young kids may not even realize they don't understand your question. There's a term called comprehension monitoring, and that's our internal process that we all have that alerts us in our head if we understand what someone is saying to us. This comprehension monitoring really develops in preschool years and then gets more specific as the kids get older. My co-panelist, Shari, has just come in from her busy day at court. So she's going to take over the chat and I'm going to keep going. I'm still talking about CIC interviews. Can you believe that? Yeah.
They're important.
I got you a snack this morning. Okay. So kids can't even tell you whether or not they understand because they may not have this ability yet developed to know if they understand or not. How do open-ended questions combat this problem of trying to figure out if kids understand or not? These open-ended questions, first of all, you're using fewer of your own words and kids are using more of their words. So as an adult with more vocabulary, a better understanding of the situation, you are going to be able to tell if the kids understand your question based on their response. I'm just checking my notes. All right. We also talked about these close-ended yes or no one-word answer questions tending to confirm an interviewer's biases. Interviewers tend to ask questions they expect to be answered affirmatively with a yes. Kids are highly suggestible and they will often answer yes to yes or no questions if they're 4 or younger. This is based on studies, not my personal experience, but I think it's also pretty accurate. And you think about the kids that you've interacted with. The studies also show that kids who are 4 or 5 and older, especially teenagers, rather than kind of having a default to yes, they will usually default to no, to questions that they don't understand, or maybe they don't even want to answer. Kids, what the studies have shown in interviewing kids and reviewing transcripts is that kids will answer yes or no, not based on reality of what they have actually experienced, but based on what they wished they had experienced, based on their desires. So if you're asking if something traumatic happened to them, they may be saying, no, these things did not happen to them, because in their, they wish that they didn't go through it. They wish that they weren't hurt by someone. They wish they weren't abused. But in fact, they did experience those things, which is another reason why open-ended questions are so important. Could wrap up this topic. The last thing about closed-ended questions is that young kids especially don't understand the difference between knowing and guessing. Kids are often asked questions by adults with the specific intent by adults to try and figure out how much kids know. And so kids have learned that the best way to have an adult stop asking them questions, even if they don't know the answer, is to just guess. Because if an adult asks them a question and the kid is just silent and they don't respond, then the adult is going to stay there hovering over them, making them sweat and be nervous. Whereas if the kid just guesses, sometimes they're right. And if they're not right, then the adult will correct them and the situation will move forward. So these closed-ended questions with yes or no's or one question answers, you're going to get guesses from kids. Kids just do it naturally. It's part of what they do. I do have a couple case studies in your materials, and I'm going to try and pull them up now to see if there's one that we could kind of look at together. I'm going to make this bigger so you can see it. So this first interview, just to give you some background why I set it up, is a 4-year-old being interviewed about his great-grandmother, known as Grandma Great, being killed in the child's home. This is an interview by police officers with the 4-year-old. So when we go through the questions, they just kind of jump in. And we see here, the officer asks, first they say, what happened yesterday? That seems like a good opening question. Then they, without giving the child a chance to respond, say, at the apartment, did somebody get hurt? So the officer has just defaulted to a yes or no question. And then the officer just kind of keeps going. Did somebody get hurt yesterday? The child nods. And then the question goes on. The child eventually answers K, which is the child's mother. K got hurt. So the officer does a good job here using the child's language. K got hurt. How did she get hurt? And I'm just going to scroll down slowly. So we can see here that the officers go through, they ask multiple questions back to back. They haven't built a rapport with this child, and the child gives very limited answers. And you can see here, this question, can you tell me what happened? This is a really important distinction because what the officer wants to know is what happened. And the child answers yes, because what the officer literally asked the child was, can the child tell him what happened? And the child was like, yeah, I can do that. But the child doesn't answer actually what the officer is trying to get at. I'm going to scroll down. Again, these are in your materials, so you can take a look at them more in depth. And the author kind of goes through an analysis. And then this is another interview with the child by someone who trained in forensic interviewing. I'm going to zoom in. And when we were talking about building a rapport with the child, we talked about in that 10-step interview technique that the interviewer will also often ask a child about their last birthday. And that's exactly what happened here. And when the interviewer does this, we can see that this child who's only 4 years old, that's really young, the child can tell a story. The child's able to say what they had at their birthday party, ice cream and chocolate cake. And then the interviewer repeats that exact same phrase that the child gave. The interviewer uses the child's language. And the child here is so interested in telling the interviewer, like just answering the questions kind of normally, that we can see the interviewer didn't even finish their last question. I'm trying to scroll down, but I'm having a small problem, so just bear with me. So this is all of building the rapport with the interviewers. They've talked about chocolate cake, who was at the birthday, what they did, the child turns 4, and then the interviewer transitions to, now I know you a little bit better, tell me why you came to talk to me. That's the interviewer opening with the child and assuming that the child rightly knows why they're there to talk. And then we can see these pauses in the interview. 9-second pause, 6-something pause. So the interviewer is really giving a chance for silence to kind of work its way to see what happened. When the child still doesn't respond, the interviewer does prompt the 4-year-old to specifically ask about Kay, the child's mom. And we can see that the interviewer has to prompt the child again, tell me what happened. And then the child goes into detail about what he heard, that he heard a fight. He says where it happened, by the bike, his grandmother's bike, and he says who was doing the action. It's a very different interview than we see on the previous pages with the officers. Again, this is in your materials. It's from a chapter pulled from the National Association of Child Counsel about forensic interviewing. So that's another resource if you want to get more information. I am going to scroll ahead a little bit and just tell you that there is another example here of an interview with an 11-year-old. and she saw her mother be killed. And so there's a whole other section for you to read about how that really traumatic event was described by this 11-year-old child, and what some really important information was given. Okay, so we've gone over some of these materials. You don't have them, so you can't read them, so just ignore that. Now we're going to move on to kids testifying in court. You're good?
Great.
Okay, great.
The only thing is, if I can't, it's very technical in here, you guys. Just the fact that we're sharing a laptop together, and it looks like we're on a Zoom panel, so it's pretty cool. And
Yeah.
I can't see your faces, unfortunately, but I'm not going to be able to read those chat.
You
questions.
can't see those small
Can I-
little
No.
words.
Leaving that to you. All right.
You can log in. I'll log in. I'll take care of it.
All right.
We'll figure it out. But I
Very
took
good.
care of that question.
All right.
Yeah,
Excellent.
I got you snapped.
I can keep an eye on the chat for you guys a little bit.
Thanks, Anne.
That'd be great.
Now that my co-presenter is here, I feel like the fun is really gonna start happening.
I'm in a very high-tech room here, I have to tell you guys. Thanks. Sorry, I'm late.
Okay.
Okay.
I do want to talk about kids testifying in court because it's just another way that a child is interviewed, whether they're interviewing or being interviewed by a judge or by one of the attorneys. It's just another method that kids get interviewed. So this is a sample from a transcript in one of the studies about kids being interviewed. The witness is a kid, and this is a question asked by the judge. If you don't know the answer to a question, I don't want you to guess. I just want you to tell us if you don't understand or if you don't know the answer, okay? So at first glance, it seems like this judge is kind of with it, right? This judge, let's say it's a lady instead of a he, right? So this judge, she is trying to do this 10-step process with the kid of making sure that the kid knows that it's okay to say, I don't know, and that the kid can say if they don't understand the question. So it seems like it's all right, but there is kind of a problem here because we have no examples given to the child. We don't know how old the witness is. So what really should happen is if you don't know the answer to a question, I don't want you to guess. And then the court should have talked to the child. And we know this because we went over the 10 steps of the investigative interviewing. The court should have said, for example, if I tell you how many pens are in my cup holder on my desk, and I ask you to tell me how many there are, could you tell me the exact number? And maybe the kid would say, I don't know if I could, I don't know how many there are. The judge would say, right, you can't because I don't want you to guess. You don't know the exact number. Instead, the judge just goes into the next kind of admonition that we want to go through with the investigative interviewing, which is, I just want you to tell us if you don't understand. So the judge has combined guessing, not understanding, and if you don't know the answer. And the judge has not given the examples to the child and role played with the child, which is part of the investigating technique. I think this excerpt is really important from testimony because as attorneys, we may have to educate the judge about the proper interviewing technique for kids. And you may have to provide information to the court about the 10 steps. What we have had happen in the past is, and I say we, because now Shari's here, so now we're a we. In dependency court, sometimes the attorneys will ask the child questions directly. Another time we had the judge order us to send all of our questions in advance, and then the judge was the only person asking the child questions. And so if the judge is going to be the only person asking the child questions, then you are going to have to prepare the judge and make sure the judge does this 10-step interview technique with a child to build rapport and to make sure they're getting accurate information. As the attorney, if you have a client who's going to testify, there's other things you can do in the client meeting the child to try and make them more comfortable and try and make it less frightening to them. So one thing you can do is you can sit down with the child, not the day they testify and not the day before they testify, but sometime in advance. And you could draw a picture of the courtroom. You could ask for permission from the court. You could take a picture of the courtroom and print it out to the child. You could point out all the different players in the courtroom, show the child where each person is going to sit. This is where the judge sits. This is what the judge does. This person right here is the court reporter. This is what the court reporter does. I think that judges are very forgiving and very accommodating to child witnesses. So you can even ask permission of the court for the child to come in to the courtroom in advance. So the child can walk into the courtroom, see what it looks like before the child has to come in and testify. The child already has an idea of what they're walking into. That same hearing where we had to submit questions to the court in advance and the judge asked the child all the questions, the attorneys were actually not even in the same room. In that case, we had set up Zoom with the great technology that we have now. And we were, all the attorneys were in a courtroom downstairs watching the child testify. We would take a break when we needed to, and we would submit additional questions if we had follow-up questions. And then the judge would continue answering the questions. I'm going to look at Shari's notes for a second.
Oh.
Yeah.
That's it. Well, most times now we're doing testimonies live, but there are times kids may testify on Zoom
Yeah.
or may want, so that's just another conversation just to explain how Zoom works, and they may be in a Zoom waiting room.
That's
in
true
that
too. I mean, the Zoom is just like a whole nother world. So treat it like you would a courtroom. Explain to the kids what's going to happen the day they log on to Zoom, what it's going to look like, the different screens they're going to see, the different people they're going to see on the Zoom meeting. Do everything you can to make it possible for the kids to feel comfortable in advance. I want to do another little kind of side note about kids testifying in court. If you're a dependency attorney representing a child, you are automatically that child's guardian ad litem. So if the district attorney or anyone else, even if it's like a family law case, and one of the family law attorneys wants to subpoena your client, the child, to go testify, they need to serve that subpoena on you directly, the child's attorney. You are the child's guardian ad litem. You hold the right about the testifying. So be aware of that. And be aware that the district attorneys,
that's important.
They don't follow it in Contra Costa County.
They don't follow it, and they will fight you on it.
They will fight you on it. Yes. And just be prepared to stand up and announce yourself and fight to get that subpoena, fight to have notice. I don't have the position that kids should never testify in court. I think it can, in some circumstances, be very useful to kids to process and to move forward to testify, even though it's very scary. So I'm not saying that you get the subpoena and you should always move to quash it and not have the kid testify. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that the proper protocol should be followed so that you have notice, so that you can do all of these things that we're talking about to prepare your child client to testify in court. Okay, I've gone nonstop. We are totally on time because it's about 5, 6, 7 minutes before 5 o'clock. And we're going to
Well done.
Yes, thank you.
Probably because I wasn't here.
No.
Okay.
This is a great time for questions. So we've covered CIC interviews, what they are, why they happen, why this is so important to have this information, how the procedure for CIC interviews work. And I've also talked about kids testifying in court and really using a lot of the same techniques that forensic interviewers use for kids testifying. Now we have a question. Okay, when would you want to file motions to exclude the child as a witness? Okay, let me take a drink. You want to start or?
That's a great question.
Okay, so in dependency for me, a lot of times our child clients have therapists. And if they're actively involved in therapy, I would want to consult with their therapist before deciding about whether or not a child should testify. I think also we've had an experience, I didn't represent this minor, but another attorney I know did represent the minor, where the child just would likely not be found competent because the child had developmental delays and mental health disorders and had been severely traumatized on top of it. So in that case, it seems like to me that would be a really bad idea for that child to testify. These are all, to me, in criminal case examples. So if I think that my client is not competent, or if testifying would completely destroy my client, really re-traumatize them, then in that case, I would file a motion to exclude the child as a witness. If a family law situation is completely OOC, and that's like old school slang term for out of control, and I really saw there was no benefit and that it would be more harmful to my client as a child to testify, on behalf of or in front of his or her parents, in that situation, I might also ask to exclude the child as a witness. I actually think that kids testifying is pretty rare. Maybe, in dependency and in family law, I think the attorneys and the judges, in my experience, do almost everything they can to prevent it from happening, because there is this idea that it's traumatizing for kids, and it is really difficult for kids to do. And I mention that because since it is rare, the judges are accommodating and they have a lot of power over how the questions are asked. So this idea that if you ask the child an open-ended question that calls for a story, an attorney could object and say, objection, calls for narrative, but the judges will give a lot of leeway in taking the time to build rapport with the client and answering the questions. I brought this up because in my mind, it is kind of connected to filing a motion to exclude the child as a witness, because in my experience, there's a lot of discussion about what a child testifying is going to look like, how it's going to happen, who's going to be there. I just remembered another time that I've had a child testify. We actually did it in the judge's chambers, and we pulled in all of the chairs, and the child was there, the court reporter was there, the parents were not present in the chambers, but all of the attorneys were there and the social worker. And I think the judge just wanted to make it so the child did not have to testify in front of either parent. And also the child was doing it in a much more relaxed setting than in open court.
Yeah, I think I was there.
You were there.
And it was a cozy.
It was awful.
Well, but I was going to say the chambers were cozy.
It was cozy. Yeah, we were really
stuffed
filling
animals were
everything up.
involved. And,
Yeah, stuffed animals were involved. Well, and that brings up a good point, because stuffed animals or the therapy dogs.
Yeah,
I've never had a case where the kids got to use therapy dogs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That would be a good thing.
Donna, thanks for your question. I hope we answered it appropriately. We are going to take a little break. So does anybody have questions before the break? Okay. Hi, Ann.
I'm gonna pause
Great.
the recording.
We just need like 3 or 4 minutes.
So do you want to start back at 5:05, or that's like 7 minutes?
Yeah, 5:05, I think. You're sticking with us this far. Okay. We're going to switch to our last major topic. And as an attorney working with kids and interviewing the kids that you represent. Okay. Shari is going to be doing a bulk of this interview, but I'll be doing some too. So let's get started.
A bulk of this topic on interviewing.
Oh yeah, thank you. I'm interviewing.
So I was going to take a poll, but given that I can't see anyone and I don't think we have that technology, again, just if you're new to this, if you're in any questions about dependency law, if you're a family lawyer, or if you're seasoned, chime in and please use the chat. What's it called? The chat box.
Okay, so the great thing is that since Shari is talking, I will be monitoring the chat and I can see the chat. So feel free to use it.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So again, I first want to say, I want to thank you, Johanna, for
yes.
inviting me to join this panel and for working so hard on putting this together. And it's an honor to be here. So
Back
thank
at
you.
ya.
Thank you. And my apologies for running late. The judge would not excuse me.
No.
So we had to take our trial till the end. So I want to just start with the, why is this important? Why are we here? Most of us that are here are either already doing minors counsel work or we want to be. And I want to just say that I think it's one of the greatest jobs there is to have. I'm very passionate about it. I'm passionate about being a dependency attorney, but representing kids is, I just think it is such a really wonderful job to do. And we really do make a difference in kids' lives all the time.
How long have you been a dependency attorney?
Okay.
Because I didn't give your bio.
I've been a dependency probably before you were born. So I actually was a dependency attorney in Massachusetts for several decades before I came to California in 2013. So, and in Massachusetts, we can talk more about this later, but it had a different models. It was an expressed interest model, but I also was a guardian ad litem for kids in their schools, doing a lot of mental health advocacy and different, again, Massachusetts had a different model in representing kids. So it was a very, it wasn't just in court, it was doing a lot of advocacy outside of court as well, which I enjoyed, which we also get to do some of that as well, working as minors counsel, because we have so much time to represent all our clients. So one great reason, one reason why it's so important to know your client, to interview your client, and why it's important to be to representing client is because we're advocating for them. We're advocating for them inside the courtroom and outside the courtroom, where they're a support person, where they're a spokesperson. So we definitely, as minors counsel, play a critical role in supporting the minors. So we're focusing on interviewing because it's so important to meet with the clients, to meet with our kid clients, to interview them, to just spend some time with them so we could find out what it is they want. It's not so much to go back to what Johanna talked about earlier with like CIC interviews, that there's so many other adults that are interviewing them about what happened. They may have the CIC interview. They have maybe met with the ER worker, the police officer may have interviewed them, another social worker. So they're tired of being asked what happened. As attorneys, we are there to find out really what they want moving forward. The other, and I'm going to talk more about how we go ahead and do that in using our interview techniques. But just in general, another reason to just why it's so important to interview kids is because we're there to ascertain what the kids need, not so much by what they tell us, but if they're nonverbal or younger, just really to go out there and see for ourselves whether they need something from their environment or if they have any needs. Just by meeting them, we could see that boy, this child may not have been to a dentist ever, or they might need to get, they have some health issues that just could be very apparent based on showing up and seeing the child.
You had that happen today in court, right? That there was a discussion about the child's environment by the judge?
Yeah.
And were you able to answer the judge's questions about it?
Okay, so you're asking me about something that happened this morning?
Yeah.
Like 25 cases ago. We'll get to that.
Okay.
Environment is really crucial. But really what's most important is developing a relationship with the child. And Joe mentioned earlier, the difference between a bad CIC interview and a good CIC interview or bad interviews is if there's no rapport and there's no connection, with the kid, you may not get a whole lot of information. So how do we do this? How do we develop a rapport with a baby, with a 7-year-old, with a teenager that really just doesn't want to talk to us?
So what our presentation is going to focus on is 3 different age ranges. Is this okay?
Yes, thank
okay.
you. This is awesome.
So we're going to try and stay in the bounds of how would you do these 3 things with a child who is 0 to 5-ish. And we'll talk about like, what is that? How is that different than when you're going to go meet with a child who's like, 5-ish to 10-ish, and what you would do differently. And then the last age category that we're going to cover is like 10-ish to like 35-ish, and how you would kind of meet all of these 3 goals with those age groups.
Are you implying our parent clients are sometimes the kids?
Yes, or like, in our own lives, the people that we want to work with and get information from, like our spouses or our adult children. Not my adult children. Anyways.
Oh, and I think we're going to do a little bit of a Q&A here.
Oh, we are?
Oh, well, you were going to ask me some different questions as we go along
Yes.
with.
So now that my partner is here for the presentation, it's going to be more of like a talk show host Q&A questions to try and prompt information from Shari, even though I tried to just do that about that environment and you wouldn't give me nothing.
Yeah, no, that was too long ago this morning. Joe, before you talk about, are you going to talk about some cultural sensitivity issues? Okay. Just let me just take one moment that as we talk about the different developmental stages and taking cultural sensitivity into account and being sensitive to issues of trauma as well, that overall in interviewing any kid, the importance of building a relationship, establishing rapport at whatever age, explaining your role and who you are, and creating a comfortable environment. I think these are I just want to put that out there because those are just they're basic, fundamental techniques and things that we should do for all our kid clients. And then we can definitely break it down into the developmental ages, because I think that's important.
Yes. I think the reason why we're talking about cultural and your own biases is when you go and meet a kid to interview them or you see them in court, you need to be aware of your own biases that you're bringing with you into the conversation. I thought that this graphic, it made a lot of sense to me, so I wanted to share it with everybody. We each have these own circles, and the kids that we represent. Can you see that one? Yes.
This one's
okay. So we as individuals have our own things going on, and that can be our physical health, our genetic makeup, psychological health, individual experiences, and our own developmental level. And then we also have what we were raised with with our home and our family. Okay, we have a long comment from Marnie. I can't wait to read it. Just a sec. So this is where we lived, who they lived with, and who we consider family, the difference between biological family and chosen family. And then kind of the bigger sphere, we have ethnic and religious culture, which can include languages spoken, spiritual life, and other factors. I am currently representing parents, or one parent who is deaf, and it's an entirely different culture to me. It's been a little bit of a shock, and just communicating with them, you just have to be aware that it's just a very different experience. And then the kind of bigger systems are social systems. That includes the neighborhood, treatment providers, peer groups, but it can also be as large as state and national policies, including systemic discrimination and housing issues, all of those bigger things that we're dealing with in the United States. We have to be aware that other families may have experienced those same topics differently depending on where they grew up or where they were raised. And we can have that generationally, right? Parents experience one thing and their kids experience it differently. Okay, thank you for listening to that. I'm going to go forward. So these are the 3 things that Shari was kind of talking about, the importance of building rapport with clients, explaining roles and responsibilities. Now, I'm going to look at Marnie's comment. And I'm going to read it out loud for Shari, who can't see it. So Marnie says, I recently interviewed a 10-year-old. I felt her affect was off instantly inside the foster home and had her take a walk outside with me. She gave me a lot of specifics about negative things happening in her foster home. I instantly reported this to the social worker who met with the child, but brushed it off as one. None of the things were, hold on. Stand by, Marnie. Thank you for taking the time to type this out. I love it. I hope more people keep sharing. That did nothing. So I instantly, okay, hold on. Yeah, none of the things were not allowed. Hitting her own kids, and a lot of yelling in the house. That's a little confusing to me. That the family of the 10-year-old reports her as an excellent liar. That is not very nice. And then ultimately she got moved to an aunt this week, but the whole situation was really troubling to Marnie. I think that that touches on a lot of different things that we're going to talk about. And so one of the things I know Shari has planned is, you know, depending on the age of the child, where the interview takes place, right?
Right. And I think, Marnie, that was such a good point, and just right on that you were there, you observed, you red flags for you, you had concerns, and you changed the environment and brought the kid outside. It is so, when you can get the kid outside, I think that is really great. It's really a good thing to do, because when I actually think often kids we'll talk a little bit more when they're outside than when they're like in a bedroom or in a room where they feel that somebody else could be listening. So they're more comfortable, and that you were able to establish rapport for the kid to open up and then make a difference. So absolutely, the environment is so important.
I think the other thing that, Marnie, you bring up about this is that the social worker had a really different experience. And I just wonder what interview techniques that social worker used. Did she interview this child in the house with other people listening? You know, did she kind of say like, well, I heard you made this allegation. Is that true? And I don't think we should assume at all that social workers are good at interviewing people, because it's a skill you have to practice and practice and practice. And we assume because they have the word social worker that they have been taught this stuff, but usually they're not. All right, I don't want to get off track. Where do you want to go next?
No, absolutely. And, you know, I think, well, let's start with the breakdown of age. So when you, or actually developmental age. So when you have a baby up to 5-year-old-ish, it's real, because many of them they're nonverbal at a young age. It's so important to go and observe the environment, because as what Johanna just said and what Marnie experienced is social workers don't always see it. You know, they might do a home visit, but the baby is sleeping in the crib, and so they never had the opportunity to observe the baby, which is why, again, as a child attorney, it's so important to go to the homes and check things out for yourself. So for things to keep in mind when visiting with a 0 to 5 is you really just want to look for signs of wellness or concern through observation. And with a baby, things to think about. Is there unusual fussiness? Is the baby floppy? Is the baby able to track and make eye contact? And one may not know whether this particular baby or toddler is developmentally on track, but if there's concerns, it's good to check or ask a care provider or check the CDC guidelines in terms of where a child should be, because I'd say more often than not, the 0 to 5 kids that we represent, whether it's been because of environmental factors, abuse, organic, they're often developmentally behind. And it's important to make the observation, to see it, and then to advocate to get them the services, to get that early intervention services that they need, that again, the county may not always know about or offer to provide unless Minors Council brings it up.
I want to jump in here because I don't have kids. I never took classes in early childhood development. I have no specialty in knowing about childhood developmental milestones, but I can't educate myself. If you are representing a child and you want to know, where should they be? Should they be able to track? Should they be able to hold their head up? Should they be showing attachment to their caregiver at their age? All you need to do is Google CDC guideline with an age of the child. And there have been studies already done for you that will lay out what you should be looking for. So when you don't know the information and you just go out and find it and ask. So use the CDC guidelines, especially for young kids who are not verbal. So it really, as Shari says, is based on your observations.
Right. So in addition to observation, there's also some investigation, especially initially after a detention, when you have a little one that's placed in a foster home or even with another relative. Things to think about early on is if it's a baby, was the baby breastfeeding? Is the baby on formula? What formula is the baby on? Are there special dietary restrictions? Are there prescriptions for this child? Because again, the children aren't going to share that information. And that's where it's important to check in with the care provider and the social worker. Many of us have heard from the care providers, I'm still waiting on the Medi-Cal, I'm still waiting on this. I think this child is on some kind of medication, but I don't have the information. So again, that's things that you just can, intervene and make things happen pretty quickly by advancing it to court if need be. And believe me, things will get done.
So for a kid who's like 2 or 3 years old, what would you do as far as explaining your role and your responsibilities for that kid?
Okay, so with 2 and 3 year olds, it depends. There are some pretty verbal 2 and 3 year olds, but as you talked about earlier, yes and no questions are not going to be helpful because you can just get a whole series of, do you like it here? Yes. You hate it here? Yes. It's like you just might not get a whole lot of information with 2 and 3 year olds, but they're worried. They don't have the language for what happened, but they want to know what happened. They can only handle in terms of their concept of time. If they probably can't go really beyond a month. That would, in terms of their understanding. So I try to keep the time frame small and would focus on if I know they're going. I don't want to say anything to a child that I don't know to be true. I want to be honest. If I know they're going to have a visit, I might say in 3 more days, 1, 2, 3, you're going to get to see your mom, and then observe to see if there's a smile or running under the table, or just observing. So that's how I talk with 2 and 3 year olds. And I might tell them who I am, but I don't think they're going to, at that age, really fully understand what my role is as an attorney. But I will say, I'm here for you and you can tell me anything, and might ask them if they have any worries they want to share. Keeping it very simple questions, just simple questions, open-ended questions.
And when you go in and meet with, even like a 4-year-old, what do you like to do? Like when you go into the foster home or a parent's home to meet them, do you stand? Do you sit?
Yeah.
Do you walk?
Yeah. So I know where you're going with that one. And it's such a great question and a reminder for all of us. When meeting with kids, you want to be at their level. So looming over them is not going to be a helpful interview. I try to just get at their same eye level. If it's a little one, I'll just plop down on the floor with them. And that really does start building that trust and rapport to help the kid feel comfortable and to get the information that you need. So absolutely. I'll even think about if I'm going to be meeting a little one, what I might even think about what I'm going to wear when I could go in. Like, can I just, plop down on the floor and play with them? Because that's something also I'll engage in with the little ones, is just try to play a game with them. Sometimes I'll even show up and bring my own crayons and paper and just draw with them and to see where that goes.
That's awesome. What I wanted to add about 0 to 5-ish is especially like little kids, because some people will say like, well, why should I go see a kid that can't even talk to me like a 6-month-old? If for no other reason, go see the 6-month-old so that when somebody tells you or asks you, isn't this the cutest baby you've ever seen? You can honestly respond and say, yes, I've seen that baby. It is the cutest baby I've ever seen. Otherwise, it looks weird, because if they ask you if the baby is cute or not, and you've never met the baby, then you can't say anything. But you can at least go and you can see what your client looks like, see where they're placed, see what their environment is, meet with their caregiver, and then go from there and be able to answer honestly that the baby is super duper cute. Do you think we're going to finish up on 0 to 5-ish, or do you have more to add?
I think we could move to 5 to 10, unless does anybody out there want to put in a chat anything that we haven't said that you have used that's helpful when interviewing the little ones.
The tiny ones. I'll keep an eye on it. Donna did kind of make a comment, but it was kind of in response to Marnie's last chat. So it's not a question or specifically about youngins, the little ones.
Okay, great.
Thanks, Shari.
Sure. And I think also, before we move on though, again, things that you talked about and what makes a good CIC interview is when they used using the child's own language. And that's something also with the little ones to repeat back what they're saying. I also try to avoid using pronouns, and we'll use, like, if they're talking about say Aunt Amelia, then I don't want to say her. I'll use Aunt Amelia's name back to them. So again, it's building rapport, it's listening to the child, it's using the name that they're familiar with, and it makes them feel comfortable.
That's a really good point. What happens if you keep saying like she or her or him or he, the kids get lost because they can't track the individual pronouns, but they can track the name. I really liked how you pointed out to use the kids' own language, because kids will have their own names for things. The perfect example here is my niece. When she started talking, my husband's name is Joey, my name is Joe. She calls me Auntie Joe, and she immediately started calling my husband Auntie Joey. And we all just started calling him Auntie Joey too. So he is, to this day, she's now like 7. I have a second niece. Everyone calls him Auntie Joey. But that's the language that my niece Ellie likes. And so that's what we keep using. Okay, so kids who are like 5-ish to 10-ish, we're getting into the age now where kids can share a lot of information. They're going to have a lot of questions. The trauma of them being either removed from their parents or going through a custody battle may in some ways be more apparent at this age. So let's talk about, how we can build rapport with them, how we explain our roles and responsibilities, and then talk about some tips and tricks for a great interview.
Yeah, no, that was well said. And yeah, so I definitely was going to share that in terms of this is when you're going to start having real conversations and showing up to find out what do the kids want, so we could help represent them in court. So I don't believe you talked yet about explaining our roles and responsibilities. Okay, so it's usually at 5 that I'll probably really get into with the kids about why I'm there as their lawyer. I might try it with a younger kid and ask them, but it's just sometimes hard for them to understand that. So it's so important to explain our role. We're not just like another adult there to ask them a lot of questions about what happened. So we want to really distinguish ourselves as their attorney. And so I'll explain that it's really my job to find out what they want, to let the judge know what they want, and also to represent what I think is in their best interest. kids have a hard time with that concept. Sometimes attorneys do. And I'll break it down for them. So again, using techniques such as I'll say, I'm a lawyer. Do you know what that means? They'll be like, yeah. And I might say, well, can you tell me? And then they're like, I don't know. So that happens a lot. So I'll just repeat again, using language that hopefully they'll understand about, I'm here for you. And I really want to learn and get to know you, and find out what would be helpful to you, find out what you want, so I can best support that. And I think at this age, they usually understand that. And then I talk about the role of the judge. For some reason, kids seem to all know the judge. Oh yeah, the person in the black robe, the black thing, they get that. And I explain that it's really the judge who's going to make decisions and involving them. But it's important that we talk to the judge and let the judge know how the kid's doing. And I'll tell the kid it's important, how you're doing. So kids seem to be receptive to that. And I also, as Joe mentioned earlier, I'll often draw the courtroom, because the kids know that maybe their mom and dad go to court. So definitely during my interviews, I'll draw a picture of what the courtroom looks like, and kids seem to like that, and explain where everybody sits. And I'll tell them that their mom and dads have lawyers. They're often surprised about that. And I'll explain that everybody gets to have a lawyer. And again, constantly asking, do you understand what I said? And asking questions on that. So that's in general.
And when we were talking about this before, like you say, you ask kids, do you understand? But don't you also ask them to tell you then? Like if you say, do you know what an attorney is? And then you ask them to tell you, and then do you ask kids to repeat back to you? Like if you've talked to them about what's going to happen next, they're going to stay at the foster parents' home, or they're not going to go home to their parents. And you say, do you understand? Do you do some type of confirmation with them?
Yes.
Like a check-in?
Yeah, and I'll do that. And sometimes and I'll just do it in a way where I'll say, you know what, I'm not sure I'm explaining this. Could you just tell me what your understanding is? And to give the kids a chance to basically see if they understand. Because kids often will say that they understand something because they don't want to admit that they don't, because then they'll think, well, she'll think I'm stupid or something. And so, I try to be really sensitive to that. But so I give the general overview of what our roles are. And then with kids 5 to 10, definitely will ask them if I'm visiting with them indoors in a foster home. I'll always say, do you want to meet here, or do you want to go outside? I may have already scoped out the outside to see if there's a playground or a backyard we can go to. And it's really great when I could get to go outside with the kid. And once I'm outside, or if we're just in a private place hanging out together, building rapport, we'll just ask questions, won't even talk about the case or, or what they want, but just keeping it on topics that the kids are interested in talking about. So maybe it will be school, or I might ask them, what are they going to wear for Halloween, or what did they do this weekend? If there's an animal in the house or a pet, maybe like, oh, do you like dogs or cats? One of my favorite topics is food, so I'll often get into food with them, and how's the food here, and do you have any favorite foods, and what do you like on your pizza? So once they're feeling comfortable, then I'll get more into the meat of why I'm there, which is really to find out what the kids want. And in thinking about that and what the kids want, because again, we don't want to go back and talk about, what happened to them. That could re-traumatize them just by asking them and having them to go back there, back to where they have to start thinking about that. So I really want to find out, when I go into an interview, I'm thinking, I want to find out, how are these kids doing in their current placement? Are they feeling safe there? Is there another place they'd rather be? Do they have family? Do they have friends, extended relatives that no one knows about, but these kids may know about? And that happens a lot where the parents, when the kids are detained, parents might say, there's no one else that could care for our kids. The social worker may not have done an extensive interview with the kid or just thought, oh, what's a 7-year-old going to tell me? But often kids will talk about, well, my, uncle, we see my uncle all the time. Can I go stay with him, or a grandparent? And so that's a great opportunity to find out about placement options. And the other area that I'm really thinking about and want to get information from my kid client is about visits, because that's going to come up quickly at the next court date. And I want to get their comfort level about whether they want to see their mom, dad, siblings. And I'm observing them. I'm watching, are they happy? Are they scared? I check in with their feelings around that. I ask them how they're feeling, even with the question I'm asking them. So those are just tools I use to get the information in terms of, what they want.
So when you check in with them and you say that you check in with their feelings and even about how they feel about you asking them these questions, what do you say?
Yeah. So if I ask you, Joe, about, I'm going to be going to the judge. We already talked about the judge. And would the judge is going to want to know, do you want to see your dad? And then I'm going to watch your face right now. Is there a big smile or okay. Or if there's a worry, let's do a worry face.
Oh.
You look a little worried, Joe. And so I'll acknowledge their feeling. If you look a little worried, does my question worry you? Does a visit with your dad worry you right now?
And so when you ask the kids these types of questions, that seems to work for you. The kids respond and share what's going on.
Yes, with some kids, just checking in with their feelings, acknowledging them, and they may open up a little bit more and say, well, I do want to see my dad, but he, whatever the case facts are, they might share a little bit. And so that's useful as their attorney, that if they're really not feeling comfortable, then maybe the visit should start supervised. I just had the case you asked me about earlier is all coming back to me, the environment. That was way early this morning, but I had a older teenager recently say, I'm willing to see this parent, but I want the visit supervised. Bravo to that teen for saying that. So
I want to just take a second here and, say that Shari and I are really talking a lot about dependency. And I just want to again apologize because we don't have the family law perspective, but I think that we can all see how this would play out if you're a family law attorney trying to talk to your client about, and get your child client's opinion about the visitation schedule, or, where they want to live, or what's happening with one parent, if they feel comfortable with one parent. So just do your best to, don't stick too much to the dependency stuff. And when we say things like detention, that's the first hearing when kids are removed in dependency.
Thank you for that.
And I appreciate Alice's comment that much of what we're saying is applicable. That's great. We've got a question.
Okay.
When you're ready.
Okay. Yes. And then
It's a question really up your alley.
I can't wait.
Okay, great.
I can't see it. I apologize.
That's okay. Anna, it wants to know is, how do you feel about using animals such as a trained dog during the interview? How is a dog incorporated to the interview? Anna, I think that you are a plant. Shari, did you pay Anna?
I did not. I had shared recently with Johanna that when it was a challenge to visit our kid clients, because of COVID, I did some Zoom and video interviews with kids. And it was really hard to get some of them to even come to the, computer or their phone and to really engage. And so I had actually would always have my dog present, like right up next to me in the camera. And that just made all the difference. And the kids would just be like, we focus on the focus on the dog, and we talk, and then I'd hear about their pets. And so pets are so great. And there are times on some of my interviews that I check in with the care providers if it's okay if I bring my dog. And if I get the permission, I will actually bring my dog to home visits. And then I will go take a walk with the dog. And those are just, that really comes in handy. I haven't used a therapy dog, but that would be a great tool to use. Absolutely. So I hope that was helpful with regards to using animals.
Yeah, I love how, Shari, you said that you asked the foster parent when you go and take Bella, that's Shari's dog's name, Bella, before you go, because I think that's really important. Oftentimes, whether it's a foster parent or parent, people can have what I might consider to be strange positions about dogs, or they have dogs that may not want another dog in their space. So asking is a really great idea. Sometimes I would bring my smaller dog to visits, and he's super chill. So it's just such a great icebreaker. And I also want to tell you that I did get your email, and now that we've done the presentation, I'm going to respond, but I've been focused on the presentation. When you see like a trained dog during interview, we don't have access to therapy dogs. And when I was talking about kids testifying earlier, I neglected to talk about there are dogs that are available that are like actual therapy dogs, like certified, to be with kids when they testify. But as attorneys who are independent contractors, I have never heard of anybody having access to the trained certified dogs just when we're going to meet kid clients that we represent. I will say from personal experience that Shari's dog Bella is very therapeutic and is a great dog. Okay.
So other ways to help kids feel comfortable though, with this age group and even with the younger ones is when I'll ask the kids if they have a stuffed animal with them that they like, or a doll or a toy truck or something that they may have with them. And I'll ask if they'd like to bring that item on our walk as we go outside or to the backyard. So I often ask, I'll have the kids bring something that means something to them to come, and it's a way we can interact with whatever they want to bring, or if it's just like a little stuffed animal. I think for the little ones to have that really helps reduce their anxiety. So that is something that I'll incorporate during interviews. The other thing with this age group, with the 5 to 10s and sometimes even with younger ones, they may not want to talk a whole lot and answer questions. So other techniques that I incorporate are, I find kids, at least for me, they love the on a scale of 1 to 10. And I'll say it like that. And they seem to know it because they've probably experienced it maybe at a doctor's office or somewhere else. But I will even use that before we even talk about anything serious. So I might say, okay, on a scale of 1 to 10, how's the food here? Or food, my topic, or how's school? And so I'll start getting, and I'll explain with, 1 being yuck and 10 being fabulous. So, and then I'll get into, on a scale of 1 to 10, how do you like living here? And I always love when I get the 10, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, and they'll do something like that. So that always makes me happy. If you get a number 3 or something, then I'll, well, what could make it a 5 or a 7? And, so it's things to work with. So that's one thing I use. I'll also incorporate other things such as maybe doing the magic genie of 3 wishes for the kids that are willing to go along with that one. And I'll, rub the magic genie and the genie pops out and we'll give you 3 wishes and then ask the kid, what are your 3 wishes? And their answers could be very revealing, which is, can I stay here forever? Or you might get the kid normal response for 10,000 more wishes. And, that's a good one. Or draw a picture of your family. Sometimes I'll be like, who's that? I didn't even know there was a father in the picture. And then you can get right on that one, or mom, or, another parent. So those are just other things that I use when I'm interviewing in the 5 to 10 age group.
Those were really helpful. Thank you for giving those examples.
Sure.
Yeah, I'm going to keep them in mind too.
How are we doing on time?
Yeah, so we have about 10 more minutes left because I would say maybe less than 10 minutes. So let's talk about teens.
Teens. Okay.
Yeah.
Transitioning to teens. And again, please feel free to put things in the chat room if you have what your suggestions are. We'd love to hear, because I know everybody has their own styles and techniques. I'm just sharing what's working for me. So Starbucks.
For teens. That's just the one word.
Give them a latte, or not a latte, a mocha, whatever fancy drink. I love taking the teens out, and that's where I get the info, and they'll talk. I again, getting permission with the care provider, making sure the teen's comfortable, especially if I've showed up a couple times and the teen knows me. But putting a teen in a car, so a lot of folks here probably know that's when they do a lot of the talking. That's when I get all the information. Once we get to Starbucks, they may shut down, but I will take the kids out, share a beverage together, and that's when you get really to the heart of what's going on with the teens, because they've been through so much. They're so angry, they're hurt, they're scared, they've just been through it for them many, many times over. So especially if I'm meeting a teen initially, it's just like they sometimes it's hard to get them to come out of their room. So that's one tool I use. And then also just asking the kids, especially the teens, is there anything I can do that would be helpful for you? I do ask that. And sometimes it creates a conversation. But I think as you build the rapport, the trust, you show up, not making promises you can't keep, being consistent. Teens will open up and talk with you and work with you so you can help advocate for them. I want to mention though, when you interview kids 10 and up, it's important to have a conversation with them about coming to court, because they have a right to come to court.
Independency.
Yeah. Thank you. So I will ask them if they want to come to court, explain what court, that's when the pictures will come out in Zoom hearings. If kids are nervous about it, and I'm very aware of, again, being in touch with my own biases. It's really what does this kid want and what's best for this kid? And if it's not a great thing for the kid to come to court, I will get out a paper and pen, and I'll just say, I'm happy to I will be in court for you. Let's make a list of all the things you would like me to tell the judge, and I will do it. So those are things that I'll do. And I might even do that if the kid says, I want to come to court, and I'll even say, well, what is it you want to say? Let's make the list. Because I want that list anyway with the kid, because the kid might say, I want to talk to the judge and I want to tell the judge this. More often than not, they might not show. They might decide to sleep in. They might decide to go to school, or they might not want to talk once they're in court. So having that list that you and the kid devise together and then advocating for the kid in court is a useful tool.
That's so true. I have a lot of teens who really want to come to court. They get to court and they're really talkative, outgoing, extraordinary kids. They're sitting there and the judge says, okay, well, what is it that you want to tell me? And then they're like, nothing. But as attorneys, Shari or me, we would have the list and we could say, well, I know that these are the things that so-and-so really is, wants to share. So can I share? And then the judge would still get the information.
Right. Yeah,
that's a great idea.
But I just want to make sure I cover some random things that I just think are important, things that I use. One thing I generally don't do is show up unannounced for any, unless it's like a little, like a baby or there's some concerns, but especially for teens, I don't want to show up at their school like I was in the neighborhood or just like knock on the door, because that is something that could really trigger or re-traumatize a kid. They could think, oh, why is this person here? And they can get really scared or embarrassed if it's a school setting. So I'm careful about that. I was also going to just mention that as much as we could also learn about what resources are available for our kid clients, just because sometimes they really do need some kind of other supports that they're not getting. So, and I'll work with the social workers or care providers on that as well. But after an interview with the kids, I usually want to conclude my interview with them by kind of bringing it back down to neutral territory, because even though I'm trying to be mindful about not re-traumatizing them or causing them added stress or distress, I will kind of say, okay, well, I'm gonna have to leave in a few minutes, but and then maybe take it to like, what are your plans this evening? Or did you finish your homework, or something they want to show me? So a lot of times kids want to, share something with me. So I kind of try to bring it down to some kind of just a neutral, positive note. So I'm not leaving after this, like, heavy discussion about, that they're not going to be going home, for example, that sort of thing. And I often give the kids my business card. They seem to like it, or at least they pretend they do.
Yeah.
But just making sure the kids have my contact information, the care providers as well. So
Don't expect, if you give the kids, especially teenagers, your business card, that they're actually going to have it next time, because you're going to have to keep giving it to them. The business cards just like magically disappear. And even though you write your information at the group home on the whiteboard, or you've given the business card 3 times, just keep doing it, because the kids, one day they will have it when they need it, or someone else will have it, and just keep giving them your information.
yeah, and something with the kids that have cell phones,
Yeah.
I ask them, I said, I'll ask if they want to exchange contact. And so, and they often want that. And then we can have a texting relation, communicate texting.
Yeah.
And often I'll give them my phone. So I'll say, oh, you'll do it quicker than me. And they seem to like that as well. So
That's true. That works. We only have, less than 10 minutes left in the presentation. So if you have questions or comments, I'd ask that you start putting them in the Q&A and the chat so we can go over them. I think there's just a couple other things that Shari and I want to go over with you. For teens especially, but for all of the kids, the backbone of interviewing kids is to be honest.
Yes.
Don't make promises that like if you can't keep it, obviously don't make it. But if you're not sure that you can keep it or it's going to happen, don't make the promise.
Right. And just what I'll say on that is, especially if you're like, can you get my stuff? I want my stuff, or other things like that, or something they really need. I'll say, I promise that I'm going to talk to your social worker. I can't promise I can get your stuff, but I promise I'm going to work hard to try to help you out here, so that's how I will respond to that.
That's a good way to handle it. If you're going to take the time to go and meet with a kid, actually frickin' listen. If you just had like a super stressful day at work and your mind is someplace else, or you've gotten in a fight with a family member or in a fight with a neighbor, and your mind is, really not there, or you're thinking about the vacation you're going to take, reschedule the interview, because kids can see you right through it, which leads me to my other point, which is to be yourself. There's no better way to connect with a kid than to actually be your true, authentic self. If you're faking, then their kids will see right through it. It's just, I admit that I am not cool, and then I'm nerdy, and then that is, a layer that the kids can obviously see that I'm being genuine. And then I don't have to fake it either, because if you start faking who you are, then you have to remember how you faked it last time you saw the kids, and that's too hard to keep straight. I think also I just want to leave everyone on this topic of interviewing kids and meeting kids is that, ask open-ended questions. If you're doing all of the talking, then you're not interviewing the kids. You're having a meeting with them and giving them your opinion about stuff.
Joe, is there time to briefly touch upon when one might want to use an investigator?
I was going to try and fit that in. Thanks for bringing that up.
Okay.
Let me see if I can get this to click. So there are times when either maybe you're too busy or something's going on that you are yourself not able to go out and meet with a kid. And in that case, you could hire like a social worker investigator to go and meet with them.
Or if a kid, sorry, but
Yeah.
sometimes we have kids that are out of county and it's just really not feasible to go
Yes.
hours away.
Another situation where I will use an investigator is if the kid is placed with his or her parents. You know, there's a possibility that something will go wrong or there'll be a concern raised about the parent's household. And then I may need someone to testify in the future. And I can give the court a report, but it may be better to have a neutral third party come into court and testify about what they saw, what they heard. So that's when I would use an investigator. Logistically, if you're a dependency attorney in Contra Costa County, you have a contract with Contra Costa Juvenile Advocates. We have a list of people who are like retired social workers or people that have the training that we know would be appropriate to go out and do this type of interview with a kid. So we could give you that list, and some of those people on the list are in Southern California, if kids are in place in Southern California. We have had kids in the past be placed in like Florida, and so we had people on the list in Florida. And at least that way, you have a statutory duty to have someone meet with your client and have eyes on them. And you can have someone see where the child is placed, see what's going on, and then you can follow up with your client by telephone if that's appropriate, or by Zoom and FaceTime and, you know, maybe TikTok. I have no idea, really. Okay. So that kind of leads us to our wrap up. Again, I don't see any questions or other chat comments coming in, so I'm just going to keep going. I think our conclusion, we already touched on the points of being honest, be yourself, don't make promises, and actually listen and ask open-ended questions. I also just wanted to take a second and go through the materials with people because there is some good stuff in here. And I have them. So we have the agenda, what we covered. We have approximately 8 pages, which is an excerpt from the National Association of Child Counsel. They have they call Red Book, which is all about it's minors counsel really in dependency cases, not in family law cases as much, but these are the case studies of the different interview techniques. And then I did provide a sample of a protective order for those CIC interviews. If you ever need to go and get a copy of a CIC interview, it's there. And then, so after page 12 or so, there's 2 different articles. The first one is Attorneys for Children Guide to Interviewing Clients. This is a treasure trove of information.
Yes.
You may forget what we talked about, but it is in this article. So look at it. And if for some reason you can't find it, if you Google Attorneys for Children Guide to Interviewing Clients.
Just email me.
Yeah.
And I'm happy to send it.
Yeah. That's true too. And then let's see here. The next article starts on approximately page 30, and it's more about forensic interviewing and best practices for interviewing kids. So I'll go back to that. Shari and we already talked about it. We're more than welcome to hear from people. If you need help, if I went, through that CIC procedure too fast and you find yourself in 6 months having to try and watch a CIC and you need help, just email us. We're happy to answer any questions, follow up. Obviously, we prefer not to get negative feedback, but if you want to give us constructive criticism, we will hear it. So, go ahead. Do you want to close out or?
Thanks, everyone. Thanks for coming.
Yeah.
Really great that we have such a great turnout.
We appreciate it.
Thank you, guys. Any more questions? Everybody all good? I don't know if you can see me.
We can see you. I don't know about everybody else. We got a thank you to thank yous.
There we go.
Yeah.
We all good? I'm gonna stop the recording and thank you all very much.